Very good, very good.
Everyone is fascinated by looking at another human being. There's something very intimate about the ways that people assume that by looking at certain parts of the portrait, they'll be able to understand who these people are, where they come from, and why they happen to be in this museum today. In my work, I try to slow down and see individuals. I'm standing on the shoulders of all of those artists who came before me. But here there's a space for a new way of seeing black and brown bodies all over the world. A New Republic is an exhibition that allows for every single moment within my career, all of the different acts, all of the different bodies of work to be seen. What you get is a diversity of experiences, a picture of what Black American kids are up to, a picture of what the global story is with regards to how young people adorn themselves and celebrate and fall in love. It's really interesting to be able to look through the history of some of the great portraits and to say, what is it about the trappings of empire and power that we can use in the 21st century? What does it look like to be graceful? What does it look like to be proud, noble? How do you look at a young Black man in American society? It's a very important question, especially at this moment in our culture. The way in which the body is seen has a lot to do with light. How does the artist choose to allow light to flow across the body? For the last 10 years, I've been obsessed with stained glass. What I wanted to do was to create a body of work in which empathy and the language of the religious and the rapturous all collided into one space. Black women have always been at the core of my thinking around portraiture. You see so many portraits where the male figure stands dominant at the forefront of the painting, and women and children and land are seen in equal measure as possessions. In my own work, the women are strident. They take the front. But there's also a sense of mystery. We don't really know who these women are. The Brooklyn Museum is extraordinarily important for me. I remember having my first exhibition here. Being able to celebrate this moment in a place like Brooklyn, where so many of the people who are in these paintings come from, is an incredible blessing. In some sense, what I'm trying to do is to come to terms with the ways in which Black American culture has been beamed out into the rest of the world. And that is a type of new republic.
I'm an American painter painting Americans. They're everyday people doing everyday things. The tradition of portraiture has become a way to reclaim time for me as a Black figurative painter that paints Black people. The work really deals with interiority and steps away from the idea of a public Black self. Public Blackness has been culturally codified as something that's always attached to resistance, which essentially to me limits our humanity and the ways in which that we can imagine ourselves existing. I oftentimes say that the paintings are a resting place for people to see a reflection of themselves that is not in resistance or contention. It's just a Black person just being a person.
A big part of her practice is that she'll pick people off the street, mainly in Baltimore,
And she'll take photos of them, or she'll invite them back to her studio and take photos of them. And so they literally are everyday people sort of doing everyday things. And I think that's felt through the work.
It's very intuitive, and I can be driving down the street and I can see someone within an instant, I know, and try to connect with this person to let me use their image.
It's almost like she's scouting the perfect subject. She's looking for something that connects to her almost on a spiritual level. It's not necessarily about any one physical quality.
Once I start the painting, it really becomes less about them and more about my work and what I see and what's happening in my imagination and the archetype that I'm trying to create. These people have let go of that idea of being watched, and they're there to meet your gaze in a different way. And it's a critique on historical Black representation, whether it be in photography or painting.
You can't look at, Amy Schild painting and not see some of the formative photographers from James Van Der Zee. You also kind of imagine what Frederick Douglass was, talking about when he's talking about, the possibilities for photographs to give African Americans back their dignity at the time.
Black Americans were using photography as a means to assert who they are in the world, thinking about photography as a democratic medium that allows one to disengage in a socio-political power dynamic that places Black people, Black bodies on the margins. Photography became a way to sort of reclaim that. And I think that that's what is happening in Amy's practice.
Historically, portraiture has really been a marker of time and place, this sort of space for who gets to be historicized. She really distills the figures in her paintings in a way that they're sort of floating in their own realm.
I think there's a great power in representing people who have often been told that they are disempowered, often been told that their lives don't matter, often been told that they are not this or that, on a canvas, and allow them to see real reflections of themselves, right? And I think the effect that has is that it allows other people who are not, represented in the frame, but who might live similar lives as the people who are represented, to say, oh, I matter too, right? To say that, there's something about my likeness, about my life that should be reflected, that should be respected.
Boys and girls, allow me to introduce you to contemporary abstract artist Sandra Silsber-Wigg. Sandra is a contemporary artist, and we call her that because she's still alive and creating works of art today. She is a Canadian artist living in the country of Canada, which is located just to the north of the United States. She uses all of the elements of art in her masterpieces. Let's talk about them, shall we? Let's start with line. She uses very thick, bold black lines to outline or emphasize her work of art, but she mixes that for some variety with some smaller and more delicate lines. A lot of them are straight, but then I see some spirals used for the cheek and eyelashes, and some zigzags for the hair, and dots and dashes for different patterns created throughout. She's got color aplenty, lots of shapes. Form is not really something she emphasizes, as most of her shapes are flat. Her space is also pretty flat, and she has a lot of texture in her work of art, created with those repeating lines that you see. Let's talk a little bit about Sandra and this unique style of art that she has created. She has something called synesthesia. That means that when she looks around any space, she doesn't see the colors, shapes, and lines the way that you and I see them. She sees them almost electrified. Let's hear a little bit about what she says about that. Here is what she's written. I am a synesthesia goddess. I have no fear of color. It lives in my soul, dances in my heart, spills out of my fingers, flowing down a canvas. I can see your aura, taste the color black, Feel the chill of the green wind. Smell blue butterflies. Hear yellow rain. Life is never boring when inspiration is always around. Wow, I can see how she can use her synesthesia, or her ability to see and taste and feel color, in her beautiful works of art. Some people might feel like it's not a good thing to be different from you and I and have something like synesthesia, but Sandra used it to create beautiful works of art. She took something that some people might have said was wrong with her, and she made it so right by creating beautiful masterpieces. One of her favorite things to create are portraits.
So you've heard of Andy Warhol, and you know he did the soup cans and the portraits. But today I want to tell you why his work really is interesting and worth your consideration. Here's the case for Andy Warhol. You know him to look like this, but Andrew Warhola was born in Pittsburgh to Slovakian immigrant parents and started out looking like this. He grew up sickly and spent a lot of time at home drawing with his mom, but he eventually escaped to New York after graduating from Carnegie Tech in 1949. He changed his name and quickly became a success as a commercial illustrator. He developed a signature technique that allowed him to trace and copy images and create a delicate blotted line. It was an early instance of his affinity for automation, or finding other people or processes that do the work for and with him. He was determined to make it in the field of so-called fine art and started shopping for a way in. Instead of making art for advertisements, he started making advertisements as art, choosing subject matter that would find traction with the emerging field of pop art. He made paintings of Coca-Cola, S&H green stamps, and of course, Campbell's soup cans. He saw these things as a common language, saying, "What's great about this country is that America started the tradition where the richest consumers buy essentially the same things as the poorest." And it wasn't about the individual things so much as the sheer abundance of things, which reflected the spread of mass manufacturing and growing post-war American consumer culture. Warhol started out using rubber stamps and stencils to make these paintings, but soon landed on silk screening as a way to speed things up. He created his well-known factory and set to work with assistants, rolling out product after product, displaying them in warehouse-like arrangements. He was also interested in products of the human variety and started making paintings of celebrities, reproducing images from publicity stills, newspapers, and magazines, making shrewd commentary on the celebrity as commodity. There are a number of subjects that recur in Warhol's work: shoes, products, money, celebrities, rich people, disaster, death, himself. Shoes, products, money, celebrities, rich people, disaster, death, himself. But these weren't just Warhol's obsessions. They are deeply reflective of the culture of the time. If you ascribe to the theory that the 20th century was the American century, then Warhol's work takes on even more importance. His work charts the development of our obsession with fame and questions the growing commercialization and uniformity of most areas of American life. Warhol was an extremely astute business person who formed his first corporate entity, Andy Warhol Enterprises, in 1957, and he never really stopped working for hire. He made thousands of commissioned portraits, the first of which was this one of art collector Ethel Skoll, based on photos taken by a machine, or rather a photo booth. By the 1970s, commissioned portraits were a solid chunk of Warhol's income. Anyone could have their portrait made for $25,000, with additional canvases available at discounted rates. Along with his services, Warhol was also keen to trade on his own image, creating numerous self-portraits throughout his career and offering himself up for endorsements. And of course, Warhol was not just an artist, but also a filmmaker, band manager, magazine publisher, and TV producer, who fearlessly explored and embraced new media. From the 1950s until his untimely death in 1987, Warhol was a shapeshifter, always open to the new, always innovating, and always reflecting the time. Like Jay-Z, but far earlier, he understood that to be an artist in a market economy meant not being a businessman, but being a businessman, and he turned himself into a globally recognized brand. People debate whether Warhol defined an ad-driven factory-made culture or was defined by it, but his work remains important because what mattered to Warhol proved prophetic. People called him a sellout, but by laying bare the relationship between commerce and art, Warhol nullified the very idea of a sellout, and in the process made possible the work of Jeff Koons, Shepard Fairey, and so many contemporary artists.